Okay, so I've had a lot of experience working and studying abroad. I've been both an international student and an international teacher. And over the years, I have had a host of different experiences. So let me start off with the first one, which was actually one of the worst. Um, I grew up in a relatively sheltered and not very diverse place. It was rural Connecticut. Most of the students were white. And I had not been able to even go on a plane on my own until I was 19, which was when I traveled to Beijing, China to study abroad for the fall semester. This was in 2007. It was prior to Beijing's re-entrance onto the world stage in the 2008 Olympics, and it was an entirely different world. Beijing had two metro lines at that point. Most people, even in the very popular tourist locations, did not speak any English, and I had only studied 2 years of Chinese at that point. Now, the school that I studied at, Peking University, Beida, is actually one of the top universities in China. And when I tell people, oh, yeah, I studied abroad at Beida, they're like, oh, wow, you went to Beida. But it was not very well set up for international students. There was no large group orientation. Even when I took a taxi to the gates of the university, nobody was there waiting to meet us. I kind of had to wander around campus until I saw some signs in English and followed them. And then they said, oh, yeah, we're over here. You're going to pick up your books and sign up for your classes and get your dorm room. And all throughout the semester, it was like that. There were no large group activities. There was no way for any international students to meet other than if you knew them from your classes and maybe they knew other people. My two best friends were a Russian student who was not in any of my classes. She just happened to live in the same dorm building. And she had great Chinese, so she was able to help me around. And my roommate, who also was not in any of my classes, she was a graduate student and I was an undergraduate student. She was from Japan. She'd been in China for about 3 years at that point. So again, she was able to help me around. But the school itself did very little. I kept wondering, what if I get sick? I don't know where the hospital is. I don't know if there are English speaking doctors there. I don't know if I should call anybody on campus if I do get sick and I need to go somewhere. Like, there was nothing in place to give us basic information about life. And that is one of the biggest things I think can help any migrant student or immigrant student or temporary student feel comfortable. Where do I go to get answers to my questions? Where do I go for basic necessities of life? This was more difficult in China because a lot of websites were blocked, and at the time there wasn't a ton of English language resources available. It's very different now. You should be able to Google most questions, but again, if you're in a rural area and you just got there and you don't know what the deal is, what the situation is, it would be very helpful for there to be some kind of written packet or person available to talk to. My second experience studying abroad was the next semester, and that was in a foreign languages university in Japan. Night and day, totally different, much better experience. First of all, the school was a foreign languages school. It was Kansai Gaikokugo Daigaku, which is Kansai Foreign Languages University. It was meant for both Japanese students who wanted to learn foreign languages and for foreign students who wanted to learn Japanese. There was a much stronger orientation system. It was very clearly laid out whom we were supposed to talk to for questions. There was a ton of material available in English about, how to get to certain places, what you could see in the area, what was culturally expected of you behaving in public in Japan. Much more comfortable experience, definitely. And it was because they had that infrastructure in place to welcome the students right off the bat. Now, as an employee, I've worked in places with great orientation procedures, and I've worked in places with absolutely no orientation procedures. My first experience working as a teacher abroad was in the Republic of Georgia in Eastern Europe. And it was a kind of volunteer teaching position. They paid us very little every month, and we lived with a host family, and we were working in rural schools. However, the difficulty of that assignment meant that they took really good care of us during the orientation. We had a 2-week orientation process where they taught us survival Georgian. We learned how to read the alphabet. We learned how to speak basic phrases, and they gave us extra material to go on with in our own time. So even though I only spoke basic Georgian, I felt fairly comfortable buying bus tickets and asking questions and talking to cab drivers and things like that. Now, they also had, during this orientation process, a segment where they brought in people from the banks to talk to us, and so we could open bank accounts. They brought people from the phone companies. We all had phones that could call each other for free, and scooter horn, excuse me. And we also had a system where there was always a hotline to call somebody who could translate for you. Even if you were in a restaurant and you just didn't understand what the waitress was telling you, you could call somebody and they would help you translate, which was fantastic. Right after Georgia, I went to mainland China, and despite mainland China paying me a great deal more money, their support system was terrible. First of all, they had told me that I was going to be in Guangzhou. What they didn't tell me was the fact that they were sticking me in a suburb of Guangzhou, which was an hour and a half outside of the city center. So there was a grocery store within walking distance, and that was it. If I wanted anything else, it would be an hour and a half on the bus, which only ran certain hours of the day. So there was that. Then there was no group orientation. There was no private orientation. They basically dropped me off at the school and said, here are the textbooks, here are your students, here's your principal. Principal did not speak English. Have fun. So, for the first few months, I didn't know if I was doing anything right. I was writing my own curriculum basically because the textbook was so terrible. And the school was not very helpful in getting me the things I needed for everyday life. They didn't get me an internet connection for 3 months. They didn't get me a phone for a few months. And then they didn't tell me how to charge up the phone with extra minutes or data. And there was one teacher at the school who spoke any kind of English, but she was also a full-time teacher. So I didn't want to take all of my problems to her because she had her own job to do. So it's just such a range of experiences. So I definitely understand how a migrant student or an immigrant student could feel showing up at a school that is not prepared for them, that doesn't know how to deal with them, and that may not have anybody on staff who can help them interpret the world around them. There are a lot of things I could suggest to help foreign students and to help migrant students, and I have made those in the blog post as well as in the work I've done with Francis this week. But the key thing is that you will not be able to focus on your academic performance unless you feel comfortable in where you're living, knowing where to go if you get sick, knowing where to go if you need to communicate with somebody, knowing, just how to get around, knowing that there are fun things to do, knowing cultural norms and expectations. All of that should be part of a welcome packet of some sort. And that's a really easy thing to write up and have ready. It does take some investment of time to get a packet like that together, and you may have to edit it as you go along. You may also need to translate it into different languages for students who don't speak, say, English. But this is something, at least a baseline, where you can give this to a student and say, here you go, here are some basic questions you have to answer, here's the email and phone number of someone you can talk to if you need to know more. And that would be hugely helpful in all the countries I've worked in where I've gotten a packet like that straight off the bat. I've always just felt so much more comfortable about living in the country because I know even if I don't need this information straight away, I can at least access it when I do need it and I know that it's there. So that's just a quick flyover review of my experiences as a foreign student and then as a foreign teacher. And I look forward to having more interesting stories to share in the future. So I hope you enjoyed this.